What's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and I'm going to go ahead and make a call on the day that Jesus Christ returns.
Well, it wasn't yesterday or the day before. Yeah.
No, but I think it's going to be August the 12th, 2045.
August 12, 2025?
2045.
Oh, the next eclipse.
Yeah, but there's a reason. So do you know where the eclipse is going?
I think it goes from like California to Orlando. Oh, through Disneyland.
It goes over Florida, and you know where the critical crossing will occur?
Disneyland?
Disney World.
World. There's a difference. Yes.
Yes. Disneyland is in California. So the solar eclipse on August the 12th, 2045 is going to cross over the epicenter of darkness, Disney World. It's got to be when Jesus returns.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with it. I hope it's earlier than that, but
what if the trumpets are like, it's a small world? What if that is the trumpet blare?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you have a sort of a higher view of Disney than I do.
Or a lower view.
or maybe. I have a pretty high view of Texas, and the eclipse came over Texas 2 days ago, and Jesus did not return. But, you know, I hope you're right. Well, I actually hope you're wrong, and it happened now.
I can guarantee you I'm wrong.
I hope it happened before the end of this show.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening for the first time, I have sympathies towards dispensationalism, but I am not that extreme. You can't predict the date.
You can't predict the date.
Well, we've got a good episode. I think this is a good topic. Not many people talking about this.
Yeah.
Older churches, there are a lot of them. Mm-hmm. How do they reach young families? I think a senior adult church can reach young families. I think it's possible.
I think they're perfectly positioned to do it. They just don't think they are. So something that I'm attempting to do, and something a lot of our listeners are probably attempting to do.
Yep. But hey, before we get there, and we will talk about that, let's thank our sponsor, Church Teams. Hey, did you know 90% of text messages are read in the first 3 minutes? Probably a lot of them in the first few seconds. So that means if you do text to church, you're going to communicate with your church instantly, and you're going to have high read rates, which you're not going to get with phone calls. You're not going to get with emails. This is a great way to communicate with your church. Church Teams does it. They get a really good system. They do a lot of other things when it comes to church management software, but that's one that I really like. So go check them out. There's a free offer for you, a free trial for you to try them out. And you can go to est.church to get that free trial. Boyd Pelly and his team would love to help you. Church Teams has been a long time sponsor of the show. Go support them. Tell them thank you. And give them a shot. If you're looking for some church management software, they should definitely be on your list. And in my opinion, top of the list. So est.church is where you can go to a landing page to communicate with them.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to talk about this idea of an older church reaching younger people. And by older, I think this is always a great conversation to have. Sam, what would be an older church? What are we talking about there?
Well, statistically, and it depends on your denomination, but most tribes, if you look at a typical church, the average age in that church is anywhere between 55 and 65. Now, you could probably point to some younger churches, certainly, and yes, sure, they would exist, but this is more the norm. Mm-hmm. And Southern Baptist, that's our tribe, among the oldest of all the denominations. Not the oldest, but certainly among the oldest. I think the Episcopalians have us beat. But this is something that we see in our own tribe. There are a lot of senior adult churches. They have 60, 70, 80 people, and most of them, if not the vast majority of them, are 65, 75, 80 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you need to do if you are leading an established church, one of the statistics that you need to do is not only contact church answers for your community profile, but then also compare that with your church's profile. And if you have something like Church Teams, you're able to easily access that data. pull that together and then discover this is our average age. You can just put it into a spreadsheet, if not, just produce the information there. Another thing that you may want to do is ask questions like, what percentage of our giving comes from which demographic group? So those over a certain age. We did this. We have 50% of our giving coming from those that are over the age of 58. Am I right? Yeah, no, 68. 50% of our giving comes from those over the age of 68. And 25% of our giving here at the church comes from those over the age of 75. So we are, by all measures, an older congregation. And to add that to the average lifespan of an American is 76. So if you're trying to figure out what makes old, I mean, that's a debate all the time. Old is as old as you feel. I'm not here to say that one is old or not, but I am telling you that if you can kind of get a grasp of what your congregation is like, that will bring you to the next question. Why would you need to reach young adults? Why doesn't it? Sam, I guess this is the question. You might have some listeners that go, what does it matter? I'm just an older church. There's younger churches. What does it matter?
Well, if you want your church to do well in the future, you kind of need another generation behind you. So if you want your church to die with your generation, then it doesn't matter. Just let your church die with your generation. But if you want to thrive in the future, you've got to have young people in your church. I mean, it's just a basic demographic reality, which, by the way, we do those demographic reports at Church Answers. You can go to churchanswers.com, click on demographic reports, take you there, or you can just go to knowyourcommunity.com, take you to the same place. So we'd love to provide you a demographic report of your community. Church Answers can do that.
Church Answers can tell you about the community. You're going to need to use something like Church Teams to tell you about your particular church.
Yeah. And boy, that'd be a good report. Use Church Teams to do your internal database and compare it to, Church Answers demographic report, which is your community.
Right.
That's a pretty powerful 1-2 combo right there. Well, but a lot of churches are in this boat. And I think if you talk to them, if you go and because we do consultations at Church Answers. We talk to churches all the time. It's like we know we need to get younger. Now, some churches have the drive to do it and some don't, which gets us to kind of the solution side of this.
Yeah.
It's a problem. If you are halfway self-aware, you can recognize this problem. You just look around. You just literally look around. You walk into the kids' wing. If you have a kids' wing, there's no kids in there, or there's 3 kids in there. It's like, this might be an issue. So it's easy to identify the problem. What do we do about it? So how can senior adult churches reach young families? Josh, where would you start?
First thing I would do is just be welcoming. This is something that you have to really dig into and figure out what we mean by be welcoming and what we do not mean by be welcoming. One of the things that we can just talk about is the way that generations, if we're talking about trying to be welcoming to younger families, younger adults, singles or marrieds, what you got to understand is that the way that we are necessarily welcoming is different, has slight differences based on the generations. So I will tell you this. Younger generations don't necessarily want a bunch of comments about their appearance. So I know that seems generally broad, and you may even be asking, well, what difference does that make? Well, I can't tell you the number of situations in which I've seen an older greeter at a church. I've heard or seen an older greeter at a church make comments about somebody's appearance as the person is walking up to the church, particularly if they're trying to be sort of loud and funny and welcoming. So that's sort of a like, well, that dress sure is pretty on you, or did you lose your hairbrush today? That kind of thing. In an older demographic, those are sort of received well in jest. In younger demographics, those kind of comments about appearance are not received well. So one of the things that I always coach people to do is make no comments about appearance. It's just not something that you need to do. We don't need to talk about it because we don't know how they're going to receive. Another part of that is older generations, I'll even say males in particular, they tend to think that being welcoming is some sort of equated to being very loud, very draw attention to this person, that sort of stuff. And that's something that's not well received with younger demographics. So I know their personality traits, I know that sort of stuff, but being welcome, if your church really thinks through, if I'm a guest, and we've done a number of shows on this, if you're a guest and you're new to the campus, where do I need to go? Where are the restrooms? Is there coffee available? What's the dress code? All that sort of stuff. Being out front with those sort of things, you do not need to be a hip young adult church in order to be a welcoming church. Just being kind and friendly and welcoming people in is the number one step that senior adults and so if your church is predominantly senior adult, you can be a welcoming church. You just need to put effort into it. One other thing to think through is that largely in churches that are dominated by senior adults, those senior adults are very, very accustomed to A, the church culture, and B, your church campus. So you need some other eyeballs to come in there and say, guys, this doesn't look nice anymore, or there's a smell here. It's just because you're so comfortable with the way the things are, you don't notice it anymore. And that's not an attack against you. It's just saying you don't notice these things anymore. So you may need some help seeing that your campus needs an update and also changing some of the words or the vernacular for things that you're super used to because you're very church culture, but they're not. So being welcoming is a very intentional thing.
Yeah, and I'll go further and say that smaller churches have to be better at hospitality than larger churches. I think I've mentioned that a couple times before. But you go into a big mega church, you expect a level of anonymity. You almost kind of want it.
Right.
That's part of the reason you're there. Now, a lot of big churches do hospitality well. They've got greeters and parking lot attendants and all that stuff. But you don't, the bar is lower when you go into a large venue. I walk into Tropicana Field. Place holds like 48,000 people. We don't get 48,000 people in there for a Rays game. Get about 22, 25,000. But I don't expect people to know my name. I don't expect to be treated in a certain way. I go into a mom and pop restaurant, that seats 20. Well, I expect a little different kind of attention than if I walk into Tropicana Field or name your sports venue.
Yeah.
So church the same way. You walk into a giant venue, your expectations are different, if not lower. So when you are a smaller church, which a lot of senior adult churches are, not all, I could point to you some very large senior adult churches, but most of them are 50, 60, 70, 80 people. Well, there's a different expectation, particularly if it's a young family. And I'll also say this. Don't smother them too much. I mean,
Right.
attention's nice, but we haven't had somebody your age here in like 15 years. It's just not something to say. You don't need, you don't need to go over the top. But then at the same time, if you ignore, that's a real problem too. So it's a tough balance, and it does put smaller, older churches in a really hard spot, right? Because you've got to nail that hospitality, and you've got to do it better than anyone else. And there's a generational divide there as well, as you mentioned. So I would just say, if I were an older church, I would invest heavily in hospitality. That being said, coffee, by the way, don't cut your coffee budget. Everyone loves to walk in and have a nice, fresh brewed pot of coffee, right? So be welcoming, invest in hospitality. But the second point here is if you don't have anybody coming to show hospitality to, that's a problem. So you got to get on the invite wagon, right? You got to start inviting people. And I'll say this: where are your grandkids? Now, if they don't live in the same town, so be it. I cannot tell you how many older churches I have consulted, and I ask them, you're talking to a 70-year-old, a 65-year-old, a 60-year-old, and well, where are your kids and where are your grandkids? Well, they go to the other church down the road.
Yeah.
Why? Why is your family split up? Like, start with your own kids. Start with your own grandkids. Invite them back.
Yeah, and I get that. And I think that a lot of them would say things along the lines of, I tried, but they think, oh, my church is outdated and that church is cooler. And I get that. And I sympathize with the struggle there because that's happening. But I think one of the things to think through is, yes, invite them back. You've got to walk those family lines yourself. But at the same time, what you might want to recognize is invite other people as well. I was on staff at a church once in which one of our most senior adult ladies in the church met a young couple and their kids at the Taco Bueno in town. Just met them standing in line to order.
What's a Taco Bueno?
It's like it's a fast food Mexican restaurant. It's pretty good. It's bueno. It's not
Never
bad
heard
at
of
all.
it.
You haven't?
I don't know. No.
They're very good.
But it translates good taco.
Well, I mean, I know that, Sam. I'm
So
a
it's not
Texan.
great. It's not a great taco. It's just a good taco.
What would be taco great? What do you know? Do you know the word? The superlative? Yeah.
Taco
Fake.
de excelente? I don't know.
I bet there is one of those. But met them there, or Taco Bell would be a more national chain. Met them there, invited them to church. They came to church. They thought that was a very sweet invite. They came to church. They connected. And then they actually ended up volunteering. And that guy is still currently the worship minister at that church. And it all began with a sweet invite from an old lady. And a lot of times I hear older Christians or seniors say, well, we're not cool. We're not hip. They're not going to want to be invited by me. And they do. I think a lot of millennials and young adults and young families, they want to be in a church with age and wisdom and the grace that comes with that. So don't discount it. Invite like you've always invited. And an invitation goes a long way. There's so many studies that go, if you just invite people, they typically will come. And those studies, to my knowledge, don't say you have to be the same demographic of those people. So invite.
No, you're exactly right. And if you create an invite culture, it will pay off eventually. Mm-hmm. And goodness, let's say you have 70 older people. They have 100 kids or grandkids in the area among them. Mm-hmm. Let's say you do a big push to get your own family back and you have a 25% success rate. Now you have 25 younger people. Yeah, for those of you who are watching the YouTube channel, the new AI software on these video calls will pick up a thumbs up and do it for you, which is really weird.
Really?
So Josh,
it did it, but
Josh just got a thumbs up from AI. That was an AI bot, by the way.
It was an accidental thumbs up, and it really confused me. Yeah, so here, can I make a side note here? One thing that I try to explain to my church and other churches is the goal is not to go from a church that's predominantly old to a church that's predominantly young. That's not the goal is to go to reach the community, and the community has old and young in it. So if there's a church that is nearly like 90% under the age of 30 or under the age of 45, that's just as much a problem as it is if it's 90% over that age. Now, there are financial and statistical differences and challenges that go along with that. So I never want to hear people say that we're trying to be a young church. We're trying to be a family church where the entire family attends. And so be welcoming, be inviting out into the community. Once they get there, be welcoming to them. And then the third one.
Get involved. Yeah, time to get involved.
Yeah.
Get involved with community events. Mm-hmm. So it's funny to me when older churches are like, well, we don't have young families. We don't know where they are. How do we invite kids? It's like, why don't you coach Little League? Get to know people. Mm-hmm. Why don't you start a preschool or a childcare facility, or and there may be some licensing there and stuff like that. But I mean, do the ministries that bring the kids in, and do something that will put you in the path of families. Mm-hmm. Even if you can't get them to your church, go where they are. Yeah. If you're like, well, I can teach piano, well, offer free piano lessons or
Mhm.
deeply discounted piano lessons to young families. I mean, goodness, there are endless ideas there.
Mhm.
Hey, I really like fishing. We'll start a fishing camp for, families.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of things that you can do to meet families where they are. And in those interactions, in that involvement, you're going to have opportunities to invite them to church. You're going to have opportunities to share your faith. If you go about your same old circles, do your same old thing, hang around people your age, well, of course, you're never going to interact with families because you're intentionally not doing it. Well,
Mhm.
intentionally go do it. Get involved.
Yeah, and I'm talking about things like volunteer in the nursery and those sort of things. Too often, what you'll hear older adults say is, I did that back when my kids were younger, or I used to be involved in that ministry back when my kids were in it, but I haven't done it in 20, 30 years. Well, if your church is predominantly older and everybody has that same personality or attitude toward it, then no one is serving in the student ministry. No one is serving in the children's ministry. And so that's why. That's why there's no ministry to have because nobody's doing the ministry. I have heard of churches that were predominantly older. One church, they had no children's ministry at all. Got one of those prepackaged sort of children's ministry. This one in particular was Awana, and a group of senior adults in their 70s, we're talking about 5 of them, got together, launched Awana in their church, and used that to reach young families. As people joined the church, they turned over some of those ministries. I've seen another church that got some of the older guys together, and they had a single parents fair. Essentially, this one, like, there was a place where you could get, and this was like a lower income area. You can come in, the kids got free haircuts, they've got a bag of school supplies. You could pull the car up and get the oil changed for free. Some little things like that started to reach, in particular, single moms. And before they knew it, the church was just overran with children and single moms, and that helped. And as there were single people there, other younger families came and got involved. So, a number of things you can do. Just be creative, but somebody's going to have to get in and help out. So,
ESL
get involved.
classes is another
Yeah.
way. If you want to
ESL.
grow multi-ethnic while you're growing younger, which is something we do at West Bradenton, those ESL classes are an awesome inroads into the community.
Yeah,
Last
absolutely.
thing, this is a cultural thing. And this is something I got to give my church tons of credit for because our older people are amazing and they supported the change of the church. Even
Mm-hmm.
change, and some of them I know, like, they get it even though they don't like it. Does that make sense? Like, we're
Yeah.
going to do this and we're okay with it. And we
Mm-hmm.
actually encourage you to go do this, even though I personally don't like it. Stylistic things, program things, schedule things. Like, they're just like, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
And it's not something that's my preference.
Right.
And they were willing to sacrifice their own desires so that the church could get younger. We are about 20 to 25 years younger on average now after
Wow.
10 years of me
Yeah.
being there. So it's quite a drastic turnaround. 30 to 35% of our church is under 18 now, 18 or under. They're students or children or
Right.
preschoolers.
Yeah. I love that.
But the only way that was going to happen is if our older folks, because it was a predominantly older church when I got to West Bradenton, but the only way that happens is for them to go, you know what? We'll support the change.
Yeah.
We're okay with this. May not like it, but you know what? It's what God wants us to do. And it's just been awesome to see the cultural change of my church because of the sacrifices of our older people. It wouldn't have happened without them.
Yeah, and it's a process. You gotta line up your things and say that the majority of these are preferences, and it's okay to have your preference, and even to acknowledge that your preference had a heyday. It had a season. There was a time where your style of music was the dominant style of music, and
Long
that's
live 90s
good.
rock.
Yeah, and so that's good.
Long live grunge.
It's great. And if that's what you like, that's great. But at the same time, 90s rock isn't coming back. All right? It's just not.
No, it's now
And
called classic rock, which absolutely grates me. You listen to a classic rock station, they start playing 90s alternative, and you're like, this is not, I'm the grumpy old man. Get out of my yard, It's not,
So
it's grunge.
so
That's not classic rock. And then I
right.
realized Wait, that was like 30 years ago.
It's a classic now. Yeah, so you just got to acknowledge that whatever it is, style of dress, those kind of things, you had it. It was good. It was great. You had it. You loved it. But things change. Not all churches that change end up reaching their community, but every single church that doesn't change dies. And so you've got to be in a constant movement going forward, not just for change's sake. These need to be intentional. They need to be well thought out and get buy-in, all that sort of stuff. And listen, if you're listening and you're not necessarily a church leader, maybe you're a member of a church and you're listening to this, we have plethora of other shows telling the church leaders to think through their decisions, to change strategically and intentionally. But that's not the topic right now. The topic right now is if you're an older saint in your church, you're going to have to allow and then also fund and support and volunteer change, or this church that you love, it won't be there very much longer. So these are 4 things I think any church can do. I've said before, I don't think just getting a young pastor or necessarily like get a new logo or a website, I don't think that's what's going to do it. The people have to have substantive change, or else you're not going to reach younger people.
Absolutely. Want to thank our sponsor, Church Teams. They have continually supported this show. You should support them. Go check out that offer at est.church. And thank you, Local H, my favorite 90s band, for continuing to put out the same old music and doing the same old shows. Give us more like you.
You said Local H is your radio station?
No, Local H is the band.
Oh, I've never heard of that. Yeah, sorry.
You should check them out.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening and checking us out. We'd be so honored if you would jump on Twitter or Facebook and let your friends and followers know about the show, and we'll catch you next week.